Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Smithy Q, and welcome back. Today is going to be game 2 of the annotated games series, where I'm going to go through all of the annotated games in my course, Smithy's Opening Fundamentals. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the read mode inside Chessable, so I invite you to come over here to Lichess, and then I invite you to search for my name, which is of course Smithy Q, and then I invite you to click on the Studies button and then my public studies. And then we will go right here. And now we're all literally on the exact same page. So let's get started. Before we get started into this game, I think this is going to be a very useful introduction, is we're actually going to discuss the Stafford Gambit, the club player's favorite. And so, um, about a year ago, I did a whole series on opening principles versus opening traps, where we tried to understand what makes certain opening traps work, what makes them tick. And let's look at this position, because it's very easy for white to play natural moves. For example, white could play knight goes to c3, and then white could play bishop c4. What could be more natural than two developing moves? Well, it turns out after knight g5, we're in trouble. f2, whoops, let's see if I can draw arrows better. I can, nope, I can't. All right, well, f2 is in trouble, and the most obvious move is to castle, but then after queen goes to h4, it turns out everything is hanging, and you're simply losing. For example, h3, knight takes f2, black is completely crushing. Where the heck did that come from? How can white play two natural developing moves and then end up and castle and lose? And I think it's helpful, again, let's actually start by looking here at the very first move, and then let's look at it three moves later. Right, move one. If we look at what's changed in the white position, basically this knight just disappears, right? And what's changed in black's position? Well, so obviously he's got to develop, but it's really this. By recapturing, so again, the last move was take, and then by recapturing with this d-pawn, that opens up lines for the bishop, opens up lines for the queen. And there's already open lines for this bishop. And so this makes it extraordinarily easy for black to finish development. He's got lots of open lines, and so once he develops, those pieces can then do things. They can attack. And um, it happens very, very quickly. Whereas white, as we can see, has absolutely no development. It's going to take a long time, especially to get those queenside pieces in. And so where do those traps, where do all those nasty little tricks come from? It's because of this. By recapturing like so, and also don't forget, white has literally spent 1, 2, 3 moves to move that pawn for him. So you could think about it that white, yes, has won a pawn, but at the cost of giving black this dynamic opportunity with the bishop, the queen, the other bishop, all these open lines. Now, if you play it correctly, the Stafford Gambit is unsound. I like f3, for example, completely refutes everything. I think easiest is just doing this. Okay, it's not as good, says the computer, but look, you're following the opening principles, and you're going to keep doing normal moves, like you're going to play like bishop e3, maybe bishop d3, even just knight c3, whatever. And there's certainly much fewer tricks there than some of the other lines. But it doesn't really matter. The idea for this particular video is, where does black's compensation come from? Black's compensation, black's dynamics come from this structure where he can develop very quickly. Let's hop into this game. And we're actually going to start by looking at it from white. And so, again, white is a random player, and black is Sigbert Tarrasch. This is 1930, so at this point, Tarrasch is over 60 years old. He's going to die just in a few years, so he's not at his absolute peak, but it's still the equivalent of, a grandmaster, one of the best in the world, versus a random person. And this game really has sort of it's similar to some of the streams that you might see online, where maybe it's I Am Rosen, maybe it's Nakamura. It's some real big, awesome chess player playing against their viewers. And often, they're going to play perhaps suspicious, they're going to play offbeat moves, in a chance sort of to confuse you. Because all of a sudden, once you've been lured into that dark, dark forest, their superior skill can take over. That's really what happens in this game. Or at least, there's a strong sense of that. Well, let's first take a look. So we got bishop goes to b5. We're going to push it back, develop, castle. So far, let's go bishop c5. Everything's pretty fine so far. It's hard to complain. Everyone's followed the opening principles that I've been telling this entire course. They're castling, they're controlling the center, developing all their pieces. But we do have this piece and pawn configuration. And as I shared in the tactical section, whenever we see that, the knight fork trick is possible. And that's what white does. Knight takes e5, with the idea that if black recaptures, we're going to be able to play d4, we're going to win one of the pieces back, we got complete control of the center, easy development. And this would have been fine for black, but it's a very easy game for white. And black doesn't do that. Black instead plays a tricky move. Knight takes e4. This is definitely not the best move, but it does certainly change the nature of the game. All right, so white's going to take. And so we can see some of the arrows that I pre-drew. So let's get rid of them, and let's again look at that. We can see here, it's the exact same thing, that Stafford Gambit-like position. White has spent multiple turns in order to move this pawn for black. As a result, this bishop has a diagonal. This queen has, again, multiple diagonals. And we can see that there's lots of pressure aiming at the general king side. And also look, what is the main defender of the white king? Well, usually it's the knight on f3, which is currently missing. And so, again, lots of pressure potentially here for black. That's what makes it interesting. But what's the downside? Because there has to be a catch. And of course there is. Besides having just the worst pawn structure in the endgame, he's also got a weak king. That king is, still on a brand open e-file. Let's go after it. We can't do this because, again, f2 falls. Whoops, so that's not very good. The best move is probably going to be queen e2, using the queen to cover against it. But in the game, white chose queen f3. Very interesting move as well. It does attack the knight. There's no easy way to keep the knight there. And it's very important the knight stays there. For example, if we were just trying to retreat, we've actually got this funny pressure on c6. It looks like nothing. But if we were to take, take, we can see that everything is hanging. The bishop, the rook, king is still stuck in the center. White is just completely dominating. Is also won multiple pawns. This game's over. And so what I'm trying to say is that black cannot chicken out, basically. By starting to play this sort of tricky, unorthodox chess, he's now inviting sort of that chaos. He has to go all in. He does. Queen goes in here to h4. Again, I got some arrows, but the basic idea, there's more pressure now here on f2. The queen does defend the knight, and maybe bishop g4 is coming. But still, that king is wide open. White would still, again, love to play something like this, but again, there's too much pressure on f2. So instead, develops a piece. And now, the computer thinks the best move is going to be knight goes to g5, winning a tempo on the queen to give us time to castle. But again, Tarrasch plays knight takes c3. It's sort of inviting white into the chaos. White has to, again, jump on in, and white has to prove that he knows what he's doing, essentially. Now, the basic idea is that you can't just recapture the knight. That loses this piece. Okay, that's not very good. But again, what about that c6 idea? Take. It's actually incredible. Virtually every black piece is hanging right now. Bishop d7. So there's one rook. King is stuck in the center. Oh, there's a second rook. We're absolutely... Don't do that. Let's do this. Uh-oh. And here's where we see the problem. Is that, yes, white has won a bunch of material, but he had to basically exchange all of his active pieces and then put his queen over here in the corner. And as a result, basically everything is stuck at home. None of these pieces can help defend. It's the lone king against the world. And there's 4 pieces that are aiming right at the black king. So let's actually flip back over. So now let's figure out how we finish this game off. So we're black. We've just reached this dominating position. But it's a very temporary advantage. So we have a lead in development. If we don't do anything, we can imagine the queen takes g3, it comes to defend. We can imagine something like d3, maybe the bishop is going to come out trying to defend. Maybe something like g3 to chase the king away. Anyway, if white is given time, white will catch up. We need to find the knockout blow now. And so whenever I'm in a position like this, I played enough games where I get a sixth sense. It's like, oh, I can feel that something is there. And when you can see that, again, we have all these attackers against barely anything, pretend this is a puzzle. Literally, if this were a tactical puzzle, what sort of moves are you looking at? You're going to look at the queen sacrifice. Okay, that doesn't work. There's no obvious follow-ups. But you take a look at it. Is there anything else? Maybe this knight g3 check. That's also a check. Oh, this pawn's pinned, right? And so there's only f takes g. Yeah, but f takes g. There's nothing really anything else. What else? What are the other tactical moves? And bishop takes f2. It's not even a sacrifice, right? I mean, because the queen covers it. And there's three different mate threats afterwards. And so, of course, this should be one of the moves that we're looking at. And do we see one of the things? Besides, of course, having like a checkmate if it's taken, what happens if the bishop isn't taken? Well, remember that pawn was pinned. If white does nothing, like tries to develop or something, knight goes to g3. That's actually checkmate. Right? Because the pawn's pinned. And so we're actually creating a huge threat. How do we stop that threat? White plays h3. Again, tactic hat on. Let's finish this game off. Think sacrifices. Again, bishop takes h3. That makes a lot of sense. It's probably working. But there's an even better. We know checks are big, and we know in tactical puzzles we often sacrifice our queen. Boom. After take, again, think checks. We've got check. We can see how almost every square is covered. If we can find one more check, it's mate. We have one more check. And so that's mate. So that is how, when you get into a position like this, you start thinking about how to find those right moves. Treat it like a puzzle. When you have, again, when you see something like this, then you've got to go in. But also, just sort of like from a practical standpoint, you're down two rooks. Like if you just do regular moves, you're going to lose anyway, right? And so swing for the fences. And here, everything works. Let's do a very quick recap. Because the game really got interesting right around here. Where again, this is not the strongest move. I don't want you to come away thinking, oh, the Stafford Gambit is super amazing, or I always want to get this sort of pawn structure. Rather, I want you to understand is that this weakened pawn structure, the less control of the center, it can be compensated by this piece activity. And if white isn't careful, white can fall off a cliff, as we can see very quickly. Now, especially right around here, it turns out that white is winning. White can win this position, certainly after this. But the question is how? And when I first published this course in 2019, I had an open question. I got lots of comments. I think one person got it right in the last 5 years. So let's discuss. How does white win this game? I'm just going to turn the computer on to make sure I get everything correct. All right, bishop goes to d7. So what do we do? So it turns out that grabbing the rook is actually the mistake. Interesting. Because, again, we know what happens if he grabs the other rook. And one of the problems is after king goes to e7, the queen's actually attacked, and so the queen has to do something, right? And so maybe the queen comes all the way back. We're going to do something like this, knight e4. We have all this pressure here, and the computer spits out this position, and even though white is up material, the position is dead even, there is lots of compensation for black coming in here. Basically, white's no longer winning. Okay. So the problem is grabbing the rook. What do we do instead of grabbing the rook? And I think the obvious move, quote unquote, I mean, there's not much else we can do, is throw in the check. Because now the king is stuck, right? King can't go over here. That basically is checkmate. All right. So the king has to, let's see if I can do this properly. Aha. King has to go over here. Check. Bishop comes back. Excellent. All right. But now the question is, what do you do next? And there's actually a problem. The problem is, for example, if you were to just grab this knight, makes a lot of sense. Whoops, that's actually checkmate. Okay. The problem is f2. By playing the rook over here with that check, okay, that's great, but we've weakened up, we've softened up f2. So this means, sorry, let me just back up, is after check, king moves over, we've taken the rook, we have to find a way to stop or to guard f2. You could bring the queen all the way back, right? But what's funny is the computer spits out this funny line. Bishop goes to b7. Again, the bishop's immune because f2 falls. That's going to be checkmate next. And then we can look at something like this. Take. We can't take with the f-pawns. We got to take like this. We drop the knight back. The computer says there's a very small block advantage. I think you can see that on your screen. Yep. Because, again, Black has lead development. Material is practically equal. White is still sleeping. White's no longer winning. That's the key point. Okay, so we can't come all the way back with the queen. What about g3? Well, now the problem with g3 is we're going to sacrifice here. We're going to take here. And now the computer spits out this really funny line. Queen goes to g2. We're actually going to throw in e4. Just like computers are funny. Because now we've got the skewer. Maybe we guard it. And at the end of the day, the computer wants to go to e2 for some reason. Sure, why not? Material is actually equal. Computers are funny. This is a long way of saying, backing up. Sorry, g3 doesn't defend f2. So what does? So this is what I think both players probably missed. Up until, sorry, here. How can we defend against f2? And the answer, I'm not going to belabor anymore, is d4, sacrificing a pawn, right? And then if it's taken, we then are able to play bishop e3. And so in other words, the way that we defend is we block the access to the bishop, and then we're able to develop. And now look, the rooks are connected. Maybe they can do something. We're going to hopefully trade off one of the major attacking pieces. This knight is still hanging, and Black's king is stuck in the center. What is the computer line? The computer line, let's just say take. Okay, we got this. This guy is hanging. There's no more e2 checks. There's no tactics at all for Black. He's simply done. Even though material is ostensibly equal right now, we can see that king is just caught in the crosshairs. So that's absolutely lights out. So that is what sort of the 5-year puzzle that I've left here. Taking this is fine. This intermediate check. But then how do we deal with the problem of f2? We deal with the problem of f2, not with g3, not with bringing the queen back, not by taking the knight. Rook also goes to f1. This isn't very good either. This is just like the game, right? This is almost identical to the game. No, the secret is playing that d4 and then bishop e3. And you can think about that as we've already gained some material. We give back one pawn to finish our development. So I'm going to cut it there. Hopefully, again, this game was understandable, and we can see, again, how the very strong player led his amateur opponent, or I'm assuming it's amateur, NN, no name, into a position where he won a lot of material, but then he lost time, because Black was entirely focused on time the entire time. Won a really pretty game, even if it wasn't completely sound. Certainly not by today's standards. But I think we can understand it, if nothing else. Even some of those computer lines, they're hard to follow, but I think we can understand the logic behind it. Black had so much time, so much pressure that White really has to walk a tightrope throughout. So that's going to be it. I'll just do a quick shout out very, very quickly. If you are on sort of the Lichess page, then I think I've got to move this up here. And if I click over here, aha, you're now and then I click on the previews. This is actually what you would see. Is there's various little quizzes that you can do, right? So Black has a massive lead in time. What should you do, right? Should you do something like, I don't know, check, maybe you should retry. What if you did this? Aha! And then there's a little thing, and then maybe you, too, can play like Sigbert Tarrasch. So just a little hint that the entire annotated game section should be filled out like this. There might be a couple that are still a work. It's a work in progress. Like, that's all I'm going to say. But check it out. Otherwise, I'm Smithy Q. Let me know if you like this, and just like let me know things. I'm really bad at this YouTube thing. Other way, that's gonna be fine. So thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Have a fantastic day. Bye for now.